I'm artist Dennis Pendleton, and this is a video lesson for watercolor painting and the use of edges. Now, I consider edges one of the most important techniques for a watercolor painter. That is how you use hard and soft edges. So we'll be doing exercises to create hard and soft edges. We'll be using an actual value exercise to create hard and soft edges. And it's quite a bit to cover, so let's get started. Now, I'm just going to start with some cerulean blue. This is a number 10 sable brush, and I'll be working on cold press 140 pound paper. So I've got my brush pretty saturated. Just going to put down some cerulean blue. Clean my brush up. This is vermilion. And while the cerulean blue is still wet, I'm going to put the vermilion next to it and just let them touch. And you can see, because both colors are wet, they're bleeding together and creating a soft edge. And that will continue to soften until the paint is completely dry. So that's an example of a soft edge, and you'll want to use that a lot in your paintings. Now, you can also wet the paper first with just clear water, and I'll use the same colors, cerulean blue again. As you can see, it bleeds quite a bit because the paper's wet. I'll put the vermilion right next to it and let them bleed together. Also creates a nice soft edge. This is another way to create a soft edge. Now here the colors are dry, so I've got my brush wet. I usually wring it out a little bit between my fingers so I get a flatter edge. But then you can go along like this, re-wet the color, and create a soft edge that way. Now, as you can see, it doesn't work as well as doing it when both colors are still wet. I'll do it again across the top here. You can soften the edges, but it usually ends up looking overworked and a little bit messy. So it doesn't work as well, but there'll be some times when you'll want this kind of effect, or you'll want to soften an edge after the paint is dry, and that's the best way to do it. If you want to emphasize something in your paintings, that's when you use hard edges. If you want to play something down, that's when you use soft edges in the painting. Another way to create a soft edge is to put colors next to each other that are of similar values. This is mineral violet, which is a fairly dark color. It's dry, so these colors shouldn't bleed together. I'm pulling up some perylene green, which is also a dark color, and I'm going to put them beside each other like this. And because they're of similar value, even though it's a hard edge, it'll appear more like a soft edge simply because the values are close. I'll give you another example. This is burnt sienna. I'm sorry, it's burnt umber. And it's also a dark color. I'll put some of it right here. Now these colors will appear like the edges are a little bit softer just because they're closer in value. You can emphasize boundaries with hard edges or play them down with soft edges. And when you have soft edges, they tend to recede in a painting. And when you have hard edges, that will come forward in a painting. So it's a good idea to use more soft edges for instance, in the background if you're painting landscapes, and more hard edges in the middle ground and foreground where you want things to come forward. To decide where to put hard edges and soft edges, you should look at your subject and squint. As you squint your eyes down, some of the things that you're looking at will soften. If you see them as a soft edge or a blurred edge when you're squinting, that's a good place to put a soft edge in your painting. If the edges still appear hard when you're squinting, then that's where you put hard edges. Harder edges appear to come forward and soft edges appear to recede. And that's in any kind of painting, whether it's landscape, still life, or figure. Another thing I want to show you about hard and soft edges, I'm just going to put some cerulean blue on here. Get a nice moist square of it. Now what I showed you before is putting another color on it so that they're both wet and allowing them to touch like that, so you get a nice soft edge. I'll do it across here as well. I also wanted to show you, I'm bringing my brush out after it's nice and clean. While this paint is wet, I did this before after it was dry, but while it's wet, you can create a nice soft border just with clear water. You don't want to go back and forth across it much because you're dragging paint around. So I just cleaned the brush again and softened that edge. So you can get some nice soft edges like this one, which is forming right now with paint, or you can do it with just clear water along the edge like that. Now my philosophy is that the artist has the final say. So it's your painting, you get to decide where to put hard and soft edges. You can squint and that will help you decide where to put soft edges and hard edges. But ultimately it's up to you. And you need to understand that the more you stare at your subject when you're painting it and when you're just studying it, the more you'll see hard edges. That's one of the reasons for squinting, so that you can spot where to put some soft edges. But anywhere in your painting where you think a soft edge would work or improve the painting, then put it there, whether you really see it that way or not. It's really up to the artist to make those decisions. Now we're going to look at one of my watercolor paintings, and it's a painting of Venice. And we're going to be looking at that in regards to how I used hard and soft edges. So let's take a look. If you look at this little speedboat here, there are hard edges in this area of the boat and around the top. And then when they come down here in the water reflection, you can see how it works a lot better to have soft edges and lost edges down here in the water reflection. Same thing up here in this area. There's some hard edges in some of this stonework, but where the moss and so forth is growing up on the side of the building, it's a place to use some softer edges. Now down here in this boat in the foreground, this is an example of what I was talking about, where the colors are similar values, like right here. That helps create a soft edge between this dark red and this black color of the boat. And some of these other areas where blue and black and dark red come together, because they're close in value, it also helps create soft edges. Another helpful hint concerning edges, when you're painting, you'll find more hard edges where it's out in the sunlight or in the artificial light. And as things move away from the light or curve away from it, you tend to have more soft edges. If you want to see me painting where I'm using hard and soft edges, check out some of my videos where I'm painting still life or a figure or a landscape. One of my favorite artists is Winslow Homer, the great American painter, and he did his best work in watercolor. And he used almost all hard edges, but he was so skillful that you really don't even think about that when you look at his paintings. Now somebody like John Singer Sargent, another American painter who did wonderful watercolors, he used a fabulous combination of hard and soft edges, and he was very skillful, and that's one of the things that makes his paintings so beautiful. So, learning to use hard and soft edges in your paintings and being able to control hard and soft edges will really improve your work. So practice, practice, practice. This is Dennis Pendleton saying, keep on painting.